So I was thinking about what to talk about, and I was asked to share some learnings. And I was thinking, what have we learned at Rovio in the last year or two that made a significant difference? And the best answer I came up with was, we learn how to have a more systematic approach to creativity. You will see a lot of common sense here, a lot of echo from the different presentations we had this morning already. So it's good that we're all talking the same language, we all have the same issues and the same focus. That's very, very good as an industry. But put together, it helps us, at least at Rovio, to remind us what is it to make a game. And way beyond making just a prototype, and how do we think about business. So I picked up 20 tips to avoid surprises at soft launch. Why 20? I could have taken 5, 10, or 50. 50 might have been a bit long presentation, but I had 20 minutes, so I thought 20 tips. That's the reasoning behind. Nothing more. Just a little bit about myself before we start. I've got this particularity. So I used to work in the mechanical industry. I used to build aircraft, beer cans, and camping stoves or camping product. For 10 years, I was working in factories, and that makes me a little bit special in the game industry, I think. And I pick up two important points from that past experience. The first one is, when I think about process, I remind myself that once upon a time I was in a factory. And when I had to change the process in a factory, sometimes it means changing the place of a 50-ton press. And believe me, before you take the decision to change the place of a 50-ton press, you think twice. And today in the game industry, I kept this pillar. I'm thinking about, what am I trying to achieve? What are the risks every time I do something, especially every time I think about improving the process? The other one is quality, obviously, and I'm just talking about the functional quality here. Of course, the definition of quality can be bigger, but I'm talking about the functional quality of an airplane or a gas product. If an airplane is not built properly, it will crash. If a gas product is not built properly, it will leak, and usually leading to some death. Luckily, in the game industry, we don't have those issues, but I always consider quality also from my past with a high level of standard. So 10 years ago, actually now 12 years ago, I moved to Finland, where I am based, where Rovio is based. And I had to convert myself, and I worked in the IT industry, where I started at Digital Chocolate working on J2ME mobile games. And I stayed in the mobile game industry almost the entire 12 years that I've been in Finland. Today, I'm at Rovio, and I'm working in operations, and I'm looking at the processes, I'm looking at the product, I'm looking at the teams. And this is basically what I've been doing for 20 years, looking at product, processes, and people. So Rovio is based in Finland, in Helsinki. It was founded under another name in 2003. In 2009 is when Angry Birds came out. It was made in 8 months, and that was 10 years ago. So in December this year, Angry Birds is going to be 10 years old. That's an achievement for I think for the industry, for us obviously, but for the industry. Significant milestone in Rovio lifetime was the Angry Birds 2 launch. I mean, for the industry, having a mobile game company launching a feature movie was quite a big milestone. In 2015, the movie was in 2016, and the movie 2 was launched also this year in 2019. We have 2 games in the top 100 chart. First one is Angry Birds 2, that have been there for a while, and more recently Dream Blast, that we launched in the last few months. This also in the top 100 chart. Those are our 2 big games at the moment. The way we organize, we have 3 different studios focusing on genre mastery, 2 in Helsinki and 1 in Stockholm. So the genre mastery for the Stockholm studio will be RPG or approachable RPG, while the battle studio in Helsinki will focus on action game, usually real-time, multiplayer battler, or battler in general. And then we'll have the puzzle that will take the match 3, the tap to clear, etc. Genre, also in Helsinki. We have 3 studios based on genre mastery, and this is important for us. So down to what we're talking about today. So I'm going to approach those 20 tips in 3 different categories. One is about the game. The other one is about how we market the game, how people discover it, and how it's downloaded. And then we're looking at the production. So it's all start there, right? We all want to make games. We all want to make great games. But once upon a time, we used to do a prototype, and a prototype was usually the core. It was really the meta. It was the core game. And once we had a fun core game, we said, that's it, let's go to production. More recently, the whole industry has shifted a little bit and said, no, that's not enough. That's not good enough. Of course, it's necessary to have a good core game, but it's not enough. We need to think about the business. So I think the whole industry shifted to think about the depth. We're going to have a deep meta, so it will cater to a lot of different audience, from the casual to the mid-core or to the hardcore. But in that thought process, sometimes we forgot that all those 3, the core, the meta, and the audience, they need to be aligned as a starting point. And yes, maybe after we can add depth to the meta. But we've seen some games coming to the gate with a very casual core targeted to a very casual target audience, but with a very mid-core meta. Sometimes we even gave green light to those games, and we thought it was a great idea, to figure out later that it was a bad idea. So one of the things that we're thinking whenever we look at a game opportunity is, are we aligned? Because it's going to be one target audience that needs to feel comfortable whether they are in the core or where they are in the meta. So they all need to be aligned. In our case, we do mainly casual games, so we want to have the very casual core with a very casual meta. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have depth. Of course it can have depth, but it has to be casual and targeted for a casual audience. And then we have the IP. So at Rovio, obviously, we have Angry Birds. But it could be anything. I mean, at Rovio, we're also doing games that are not Angry Birds related. So remember, we have the core, the meta, and the audience. They all align. And then we have the IP. So recently, I'm just taking an example. We had a very mid-core alignment on a game idea. And then the first visual we had on the IP was a very cool, hip teenager. And we were thinking, well, cool and hip is cool, but teenager, how does that fit? How does it resonate with the target audience? The target audience was a bit older, male-oriented, so 35-year-old male-oriented, mid-core audience. But suddenly the teenager didn't fit. So it was just a hunch. We were not really sure, but it didn't feel aligned. So for Angry Birds, it's quite kind of easier because we know our audience for 10 years. We've been building the audience. We've been catering to the audience. It's a bit easier to understand. But still, we need to understand, is the audience, is the IP that we're using is really aligned with what we said. So alignment, coherence is quite important in all this. Then it's about innovation. So we do a lot of copycat. And by the way, copying is quite difficult. It's quite easy to copy something, but how to copy the feeling, the reward, the sensation that we have while playing, this is a lot harder. But while we design a game, we need to understand where we innovate. We need to understand what do we bring differently. It's very important in the next few slides that you will see. But understanding where we innovate, being very true to ourselves, where we innovate, and writing it down and talking to each other about it is a fundamental of what we're trying to do. We copy certain things because they work, because we like them, because they make sense in our game ideas, but at some point we want to bring something new. And if there is nothing new, we really have to ask ourselves, is that a good idea, yes or not? And if there is something new, then what it is. Let's force ourselves to write down where we innovate. And then we can also look at what is the percentage of innovation we bring in the game to understand what kind of risk we are taking. Then we look we look back at the audience, and it's easy to define the audience with age and gender. 35-year-old, 45-year-old, or 35 to 45-year-old male. But that doesn't really help us. It doesn't help us to understand how they behave. So of course we're looking at the different motivation. And if we are targeting an audience that has that like collecting, it's a very different thing to target an audience that likes to destroy. So even in a match 3 game, you can highlight collection or you can highlight destruction in a very, very different way. So it is important to consider the audience not only by age and gender, but also by motivation type. Once we understand what are the main motivation, it's not one motivation, it's their dominant motivation, it's easier to remind ourselves why we are making the games. And when we have to make decisions, we can always go back to the audience motivation and maybe take less risk. So if the main motivation is collection, and we have to make a design decision, let's put collection first. Make sure that it caters to their motivation. So we did list the innovation that we are bringing to the game. Usually the innovation we bring are linked to risk. Because they're innovation, we don't know if it works. So for us at this point, there's no this point, but at some point during the process, we want to stop and say, where is the innovation, where are the risks, and what are our hypotheses? Again, because as we go forward, as we're going to test the game, we want to have answers to that. And at the end of the day, writing them down, talking to ourselves about those ones is important because it allows us not to forget those and to make sure, again, that we are aligned, that if our main risk is we don't know if this target audience is going to be interested in this type of gameplay, let's make sure we test it somewhere before soft launch. Soft launch will be too late, the game will be done, the partner will be lined up, the whole organization will be lined up, it will be too late. So how soon can we test those risks and how soon can we understand those hypotheses and give answers to those hypotheses? So again, being very true to ourselves is as simple as writing them down, everybody agreeing that these are our risks, those are our hypotheses, and how do we leverage, test those two before soft launch. Estimate KPIs. So we talked about it in one of the early presentation about it's difficult to estimate KPI. And here I'm not saying we should spend a lot of time, a lot of research to look at competition and what are going to be my KPIs and kind of ink it, carving it into stone and saying this is the KPI. No, what I'm saying is it is important to estimate the KPIs. What are we talking about? Because very quickly we're going to talk about CPI and LTV. And at Rovio, we write them down, we print them, and we put them on the frame. And the frame is in the main kitchen of the building. So whenever we start production, we say to everybody, we don't know a lot, but we think we're going to hit those kind of KPIs in terms of LTV and in terms of CPI. This is what we've been researching. We haven't spent too much time on it, but this is where we are. Because very quickly in soft launch, you will be asked to justify your LTV and your CPI. So it's good to know a little bit the ballpark where you are. Then, this is the industry standard. We test early, often, and we go live fast. All the hypotheses, all the risks need to be tested. So we talk about open beta, we talk about closed beta, we talk about user test, we talk about diary studies, we talk about focus group, we talk about all this. This is new craft that came into the industry a few years ago. We need to embrace it, we need to use it to our benefit. We just talked about that, just in the talk before, the size of the audience. It is important. It's very good to see that we all have the same vocabulary. Again, because we have LTV, we have CPI, especially we have LTV, we need to evaluate the scale of the target audience. What is the size? Which one do we think we can address, we can touch, we can put an ad in front of, and how many are going to download it? This is going to give the scale of the potential revenue. And we do that very early, so we have rough estimation about what is the size of the potential revenue for a game. Then it's about the competitors. So it is important to look at the market, to understand what has been just launching. Through the conferences like this, it is very important to talk to colleagues to try to get a little bit of information about what the colleagues are working on. And why it's important, especially for us at Rovio, is because 1 year we launched a game, we had amazing KPIs in soft launch, but when we launched in global launch, 2 other competitors launched a very similar puzzle game at the same time as us. So the CPI went through the roof, and we were like, oh my God, we can't scale. And that was very problematic because we had projected all the revenue for the year based on the soft launch KPI results, etc. So any information we can gather about the competition, what they're working on, when they're likely to launch, it's all hypothesis, but anything we can know is going to help us maybe to put the right window for the launch, for example, and to understand what they're building to figure out, if we are aligned with them or not. Where is it? Here. Then the value proposition. You remember about the innovation that I mentioned? So we need to figure out what innovation. This is what we're going to sell to the users. The users are already playing games. They haven't waited for our games. They're already playing games. Unless we're super innovative, most likely they're playing at the moment in a very similar game. So what are we selling to them? Can we phrase that out? Because if we can't phrase that out, nobody will understand it, and most likely nobody is going to download it. So at some point, we need to understand very clearly what is our value proposition. It's not just a cool game. It's a cool game that does A, B, and C. And then we'll have to look at that. The players already playing their game, is this value proposition good enough for them to dump their current game, or at least play 2 games in parallel? Because most likely the target audience we have are people already play our competitor's game. It's very often we make a game design document, make a business plan saying, we want this audience playing that game, and by the way, we got inspired by that game. So those people are playing that game. How are we going to make them choose the game? Stop playing and start with us. So value proposition, and then strong enough value proposition so existing players are going to choose our game. And the million-dollar question is, can we display it? Can we make a 2D ad displayed on Facebook that will explain to people like me, a player or a non-player, that, hey, I'm the same game as this one, but better? Is it something that we can visually communicate on? And that we can test very early, because I don't need a build for that. I don't need a game design document for that. I just need one ad. I can do an ad in concept. I can spend a bit of money, put it on Facebook, and I can see if people are already clicking on it. If people click on it, by the way, I haven't spent much money because I don't even have a team working on the build. If I know that people are already excited about what they see, I'm onto something. I can invest more. So we can do that, and this is important because it has all the depth about understanding the innovation, understanding why people will shift a game, and understanding can I sell this game on a 2D ad. This point is extremely important for us. The top of the funnel, we discussed about it. Also very early, I can put this ad on Facebook. I can look how many impressions will lead to how many clicks will lead to how many downloads. When I don't have a build, I cannot test the download, but I can test how many people click on the button, maybe on a fake app store. There's some technology out there that duplicate the app store. People will read the description, look at the icon, look at the visual, click on it, and it will be counted as a download, but that will be a very, very early estimation about the top of the funnel. Of course, we don't know how many people are going to play and retain, that we don't know, but again, I can do that without a build, and this is fairly cheap to do, and give us a good indication about the quality of what we're trying to build. So estimate CPI, we discussed about it. CPIs have a trend. CPIs are disrupted whenever, like I explained, 3 games are launching on the same genre the same week. So there's a lot of volatility, so we shouldn't spend too much time on that, because whatever answer we have on this estimation is going to be very volatile. But still, it is important to understand what is the market shape at the moment in terms of CPI. And usually the CPI, they have a quite steady slope on the growth. So if we launch in 18 months or in 24 months, we know it will have an effect on the CPI. And of course, that leads to the delivery time. And one thing I want to highlight here, which is important, is that make a game, design a game is hard, but executing a game is even harder. You know, putting the team together with the right expertise, the right communication, the right prioritization, being able to deliver on time at a high quality, this is also extremely hard. So not all the success factors are on the designer, they're also on the team. We need to plan for that, we need to consider the team, we need to consider communication tool, planning tools, all this is extremely important, even, I mean, way before soft launch. We don't underestimate the difficulty to execute a great idea, and we need to plan for it. And then can we really build, once we've planned all this, can we do a pre-production? That's way before soft launch. Can we really build this idea? Do we have all the right technology? Sometimes we think we have the technology, but especially for real-time multiplayer games, we think we have the technology, doesn't work. You do a real-time multiplayer game, West versus China, go figure the server, you know, latency, etc. So can we really do that? Can we really deliver X amount of art asset per week as per plan? We need to do pre-production for all this way before soft launch. Oh, I forgot that. And estimate delivery time. I just mentioned it, CPI has got a growing trend. If we don't deliver in the window that we have set ourselves to deliver, the CPI will be likely higher. It means that we need to deliver more LTV. So delivery time, of course, is the whole discussion about quality of a delivery. I mean, we've all heard that. We're just here to make a game. A good game is a good game forever. A bad game is a bad game forever, this type of things. But delivering a time according to the plan that we have set to ourselves has a value. Again, design is difficult, execution is difficult. Being able to deliver according to the specification we've put to ourselves is a quality, is something that is not easy to do. And scope is a variable. Quality, cost, delivery, scope. Those are my 4 variables. Quality, I can say, I don't want a high quality game or high quality art asset, I want a low quality, get them quick and fast, that's fine. That's a decision I can make. I can put the bar higher or low. Cost, I can say I put 10 people or 15 people, that will affect the cost. Time, I deliver in January or December. Scope, oh no, I need my whole scope, I can't change my scope, I need to tick all my boxes before I'm in soft launch. If scope is not a variable in our mind, we will have to compromise on quality, cost, or delivery. And guess what? Usually it's delivery. Because quality, we don't like it, cost is always difficult to get more people, etc. Usually it's delivery. So if scope is not a variable from the get-go, then no surprise, wait for it. We are going to be late. That's pretty much sure. But if scope is a variable and delivery time is another variable, maybe we can adjust a little bit the two. Maybe there's things that we can deliver during soft launch or during global launch. So for me, it's super important that we start the whole process with understanding that scope is a variable. It cannot be a fixed. And agree on the polish level. I've heard game lead telling me, my artists are spending too much time to polish. I need the game out because I need to learn about a specific feature that has nothing to do with the art. So my priority at the moment is to leverage one of my main risks, which is about putting a build out in order to test that risky or this hypothesis. It's not about the art quality. So it is important that we all agree in the team the level of polish that we want in the game for the different tests that we want to do. And all this can be done way before soft launch. It has to be done before soft launch. So this is my 20 points. And my main message here today is that we don't need to wait for soft launch to understand and to anticipate the product performance. We need to have hypotheses on the product performance, on the marketability, how much it will cost, how will it work, how the audience is interested and is going to engage, and the ability to execute. Make sure we have a setup in the studio that allows us to deliver those great ideas. All this needs to be done way before soft launch, very early while we start production. And that's it.
We do have about 5 minutes for questions. So, ask away.
Any question? Over here, in the corner, left.
I'm coming.
There has been some debate in the industry about moving from this kind of traditional marketing categories to this kind of post-demographic marketing categories, meaning that how useful age and gender are to defining audience when you have big data and you can focus on taste and motivations only. And in your presentation was kind of combination of both of these two approaches. So how do you see the relationship between the old world marketing demographics and this new world with the big data and taste only?
Okay, so if I have the choice, I would like to experiment the need-based game design. I define my audience, I understand their motivation, I understand even their needs, and I have a great idea, but I make sure that the features I develop for these great ideas are in line with those needs and motivation. So I consider the audience first. Of course, I have a great idea that has nothing to do with my audience. It's a game jam and core and everything, but I link the two very, very early in the process. That I feel way more connected than age and gender, where I say I'm going to make a game for 35-year-old male, which means nothing much for me except that they have money. And historically they have been spending. Now, of course, in the game, in the machine learning aspect, for example, we can detect very early who's who. Who came to the game? Is it going to be a spender or non-spender? Is it going to be somebody who's going to watch a lot of ads, or is coming from our own portfolio? We can predict quite a lot of things, churn prediction, payment prediction. So I like to use the technology in that sense with the big data, but in terms of design, I prefer the motivation scenario. Any other question? Yes, one more here.
Can you raise your hand? Okay.
Hey, I think the first Angry Birds is famous for being something like the 48th game launched by Rovio or something like that.
51.
Okay, close.
Yes.
Do you currently have like a target of games that you're trying to launch every year, and how's that looking like? Because it seems like you're moving to higher quality, less games, I guess.
So historical data. I mean, the last years we've been launching. We have been launching 2 games. This public data, and of course I have to be a bit careful because we're a public company, so I cannot give any trade secrets. So publicly, you know that the last year we've been launching two games. In the last year and a half before that, we haven't been launching any game at all. So we were a little bit trying to go to this less game, higher quality. Didn't 100% work out for us. But we were very lucky to have this portfolio, very healthy portfolio that was able to grow. We grew a lot, Angry Birds 2, through live operation, and that was a great growth driver. Now, another public information that we have said in the quarterly printout is that we're trying to launch 2 games per year. So this is the target we're giving ourselves, 2 games per year. Doesn't mean that we don't launch 4, but at least the public target is 2.
Thanks a lot, Cyril.
Thank you very much.